All right, that's where I can see them. All right, well, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. It is 2:03 on this, what's today, Wednesday morning or afternoon, 2:03. I'm Sandra Brown, so good afternoon, everybody. I am a Ripper Board member and a co-chair for the Peace Officers Training and Standards Recruitment Subcommittee, along with Melanie Ochoa, who's present. Before we get started, I'm assuming that we need to take roll call to ensure that we recognize everybody attending. And so also to get the Ripper Board members that are present, I want to hear your voices. I'm going to start with Northern California. Who's from Northern California besides myself? Sandra Brown. Anybody else from Northern California?
Brendan Woods.
Brendan, again, tell me, where are you?
Alameda County.
Alameda County. Okay, right on. Right on. You're in my neighborhood, although I'm in Contra Costa County, but we're up here.
Next door.
Anybody? I'm sorry, what was that last?
Said next door.
Oh, yeah, we're next door, but I'm always in Alameda County. In Central California, who do we have present for Central California? For this subcommittee? Anybody in Central California present? Okay, and then our lovely Southern California folks.
Yes. Hi, it's Angela Sierra with the Department of Justice from LA.
LaWanda Hawkins, Justice for Murdered Children, Los Angeles.
Hi, it's Melanie Ochoa with Staff Attorney for the ACLU of Southern California.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak up so that we know that you're here? I see Aisha is here. Allison. Anybody else? Okay. All right. We'll go over the public. I want to talk just a little bit about the public comments that'll come up later. I want to stipulate right in the beginning that if we do have public comments, that each member will be held to 3 minutes and that we all need to respect that time. And we'll do that as we come into the public comments each time that we have those. The first order of business, I would like to make sure that we approve the minutes from the August 5th, 2020 subcommittee meeting. We had 5 members on that subcommittee present on the 5th, and is there a motion to approve the August 5th meeting minutes?
Motion to approve. Board Member LaWanda.
Thank you, LaWanda. Can I get a second?
I'll second that. This is Angela Sierra.
Thank you, Angela. Any abstentions? No. All right. Well, that's going by pretty quick. Folks that are on, I have 34 people that are on. Let's make sure that our microphones are on mute when we're not speaking, because I always screw that up and I got stuff going on in the background. So thank you for that. Make sure we're all on mute. Okay. We did all that in 6 minutes, people. That's pretty quick. Hopefully this will be a very tight and concise meeting. So we've approved the August 5th meeting minutes, and the next order of business, and I hope that I'm going in the right way, is an update of subcommittee work by the DOJ. Aisha Martin Walton will start us, and then it'll be followed by Anna Rick and Tony Jackson discussing diversity in law enforcement, and we have about 20 minutes for that, and hopefully I didn't miss anything.
Oh, good morning. Good afternoon. As Co-Chair Angela stated, Sandra stated, my name is Aisha Martin Walton. I'm with the Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Enforcement section, and I wanted to provide an update on the draft section of the report for POST that you should have already received as it relates to training. So the first item that's in the report is the information about the background of the Commission on the Peace Officer Standards and Training. So POST is an entity in the executive branch. It sets the minimum selection and training standards for all law enforcement in California. POST provides service to approximately 96,000 peace officers and dispatchers. It has over 600 law enforcement agencies that participate voluntarily in POST. POST has approximately 135 staff and over 30 law enforcement consultants. It's got a budget of $82 million and an 18-member person commission. This commission holds 3 meetings a year. It has an advisory committee and a finance committee, and they also hold public meetings. So to learn more about upcoming POST commission meetings, visit their website at www.post.ca.gov, and I believe they have a commission meeting coming up on October 22nd. So this is another good way to find out what is going on in the state of California in the area of training law enforcement. The legislative mandate. In 2015, RIPA amended the Penal Code Section 13519.4, which created specific requirements for POST with respect to training and guidelines to prevent racial and identity profiling. It requires that the curriculum be evidence-based and include pattern, practice, and protocols. POST is required to consult with the RIPA board as they develop training courses and guidelines. The RIPA board is then required to include in their analysis of the training courses and put that in the annual report. So both POST and RIPA have responsibilities as it relates to training in the area of racial and identity profiling. Okay. The draft report, which you've received a copy of, has a lot of information, but for purposes of this presentation, we decided to just focus on the 5 courses that are mandated pursuant to AB 953. So POST and the board have been working collaboratively together for about 3 years since the inception of the board to identify training courses that could meet the mandates of AB 953. So what they've done is there are 2 courses at the academy level for new recruits. And then there are 3 courses that POST has developed or is in the process of developing in the area for in-service officers. So in the academy side, for new recruits, there are 42 courses that POST has for new recruits, and this totals about 664 hours. So of those 42 courses, there are 2 courses, and they refer to them as learning domains, that focus specifically on the requirements under AB 953. So the first one is principal policing in the community. The second one is cultural diversity and discrimination, and that's for, again, the new recruits. And then on the in-service side, for officers who are, already seasoned officers, they will be mandated to take a course entitled Bias and Racial Profiling, and that's a video. They are required to also take Implicit Bias and Profiling Update, and that's an online course. And then there is POST is in the process of developing an Implicit Bias and Profiling Update course for supervisors. So those are the 5 classes that since AB 953 passed that POST specifically designated and determined would meet the mandates under that bill. However, POST does have several other classes and efforts that they are engaged in that are not mandated, but do touch on implicit bias and the concepts that the purpose of the bill is aimed at addressing. So again, these are the 5 mandated courses. So, okay, and now I want to go into each course so that you can see what has been developed by POST and what the board has addressed or looked at in relation to this course. So the first one, and this is the academy, one of the academy courses, this is Principal Policing in the Community, and it is called Learning Domain 3. So this particular course has been around for a while. It was first published in 1999, and then it was revised in 2004, 2005, 2018, and then most recently, April of 2020, and that was to fold in the racial and identity profiling piece. So in 2018, the POST subcommittee of the RIPA board reviewed a course called Principal Policing, and this course was developed in about 2015 by DOJ, community partners, law enforcement, and POST, and the focus was on procedural justice and implicit bias. The POST-RIPA board subcommittee reviewed that course and found that the course met most of the legal requirements and then recommended to POST to adopt it along with 3 suggestions to make it more relevant to AB 953. So POST agreed to integrate the Principal Policing course into its existing academy course entitled Community Policing, and then change the name to Principal Policing in the Community, which is the course we have now. POST then increased the course hours from 18 to 26. So this is a robust course that they have for the new recruits. And this is the course that became effective in April 2020. It's unclear whether the board has had a chance to review the course after the 2 were combined and analyze the course after the 2 were combined. So we want to follow up with POST to get more information on that. So that's something you want to put a pin in, because it may be a course that, in terms of the board's responsibility, that you may feel the need to review and analyze now that it's been combined. That's the first one. Number 2, that's cultural diversity and discrimination. And that is, again, for the new recruits in the academy, and it's their learning domain number 42. This particular course was first published in January 2001, and it has had several revisions: 2004, 6, 7, 8, 2010, 11, 12, and the most recent is this month, October 2020. So POST designated that this particular course for new recruits meets the mandates of AB 953. So this is another course that it's unclear whether or not the board and POST collaborated to develop this revision, and it's unclear whether or not the board has actually had a chance to review and analyze this course. So we want to follow up with POST on that. So this is another one you probably want to put a pin in, because it may be a course that the board may wish to review and analyze and put in one of the future reports. Okay, number 3. All right, now we're moving to the in-service officers, and this course is called Bias and Racial Profiling, and it's a video. Oh, just to back up, the academy courses are all in person. So this course is a 2-hour video course for seasoned officers after they have come out of the academy. And in 2017, the subcommittee reviewed a course that POST offered, and it was entitled Bias-Based Policing, Remaining Fair and Impartial. And that course was also for in-service officers. So following collaborative reviews and discussions with the subcommittee, POST replaced this course with this 2-hour video entitled Bias and Racial Profiling. And this course was determined to be more appropriate to AB 953. So this course is designed to provide officers continued mandatory 2-hour racial and identity profiling training at least once every 5 years, following, again, their graduation from the academy. So this is a stipulation in AB 953 that seasoned officers have racial and identity profiling training once every 5 years for 2 hours. A subcommittee member was represented in the development and production of this video from the early development through the production, and she was deemed a subject matter expert. in April 2020, the video was done. It was produced, ready to go, and it was in the post-production phase. And so in April of 2020, board members were invited by post to view the post-production of this course and provide comments. Post was unable to consider the comments because the production was complete. So this video was released in May 2020, and you will be able to see some of the board members' comments in the draft report that you received September 2nd. So we wanted to include, even though Post was not able to take those comments and fold them into the product, we felt it was important for those comments to be mentioned in the draft report. Post has agreed to work continuously with the board and try to work to have the board involved earlier on future course development. So that's course number 3. Number 4, Profiling and Implicit Bias Refresher Online. This is an online course, which means that seasoned officers can have access to this course 24/7. In 2018, Post began collaboration with the subcommittee members on the early development of this 2-hour self-paced course for seasoned in-service officers. Post then had one-on-one interviews with board members in the past board members and present board members. Board members were then invited to review an online demonstration of this course, and Post hosted content review and feedback sessions, and 4 of the board members were present. Some of you are there today. The board provided comments and looks forward to seeing some of their input adopted. This particular course is going to be rolled out this fall. So look for some of your comments to be adopted in that course. And again, in the draft report that you received September 2nd, you will find some of the actual comments that board members made to Post during this extensive collaborative review. Okay, the last course that, again, this is what Post has deemed to comply with AB 953, and it is Profiling and Implicit Bias Refresher for Supervisors. So this is the exact same course, but the target and the focus is for supervisors. So it is anticipated that Post will consult with the subcommittee, because this one is in development. So it's anticipated that Post will consult with you all on the development, production, and review of this course. And Post anticipates rolling this one out in the fall of 2020. So that gives you a summary of the 5 courses that were created as by Post comply with AB 953. Next, we have, I wanted to just bring to your attention we pulled out interests, concerns, comments that the board members have made over the years, whether they were in full board meetings, subcommittee meetings, and most of these are reflected in the minutes. But some of the areas, these are just a sample over the past few years. The first one is use RIPA data in course selection and development. Another is use the actual footage of officer-involved situations in lieu of scripted scenarios with actors. Have officers role play the position of the citizen being stopped and the community and family context. Provide courses on officer peer-to-peer accountability, reporting obligations, supervisor responsibility, and then provide tools to help the officers feel supported when they do report. Provide courses that address bias that leads to a stop and how officers' actions can change as the stop evolves. Training should have deeper discussions about parole and probation and implicit versus explicit bias, and include courses on or deeper discussions on consent versus being detained. Another area is review the impact that implicit bias training has on its application in the field. In other words, there's a lot of training on implicit bias, but how is it working? Is it effective? So one of the board members would like to see some research in terms of, how effective this type of training really is out on the street. Review the role of contemporary police and the impact of misconduct on community perceptions. So in other words, a deeper engagement from the context of the community. And then another one is connect academy training with field training. Give academy graduates a packet, this is one suggestion, with questions to answer after field training to determine how implicit bias training was applied. So in other words, when a new recruit graduates, they immediately go and are assigned and are working with a field training officer in the field. They haven't gone solo yet. So it's a great opportunity for them to have an extension of the training that they've learned on implicit bias in the academy. So that's an idea there. And then an accompanying idea is that the field training officer who receives those recruits receives similar training in implicit bias, racial and identity profiling, and cultural diversity, because doing that will strengthen that training officer's ability to assist that recruit in applying the implicit bias and racial and identity profiling training that they just learned in the academy. So these are just some of the ideas. There's several, starting with the 2018 report, the 2019 report, and 2020 report. And of course, this is not this process of training and developing courses and reviewing courses is, as you know, ongoing. And POST is committed to working with the RIPA board on future projects. So that's real exciting. So in conclusion, what I went over today was just information, structural information on POST, the fact that it has a commission and an academy, and then just raising the level of the courses that were deemed mandatory. And again, there are several courses that are voluntary that officers can take. And then to just kind of underscore POST responsibilities, the board's responsibilities, and the status of the 5 courses, and then to just touch on some other areas. So hopefully this information that I provided will assist you as you kind of drill down and frame your discussion that you're about to have for about an hour in terms of what kind of work you want to do with POST, what are the issues that you feel are important, and what are some areas that you think are really you're able to do within the next 12 months and you'd like to see more in the long term in future reports. So with that, I will turn it over to Anna Rick, who's also with DOJ, and Tony Jackson, who will talk a little bit about recruitment. And we can, Sandra and Melanie, we're free to either answer questions now or maybe as part of the discussion. We can do it either way. And then also POST is on the line for the training area. POST is on the line and can answer probably more detailed questions if you have them.
Okay, so Aisha, thank you. That was very well done. And I would suggest that we hold the questions on this section after Anna and Tony do theirs, and we can ask all the questions at the same time. But I thought that was very thorough. I appreciate it. I read the draft last night. I read everything, and you've covered it very well. I will, however, have some comments later to go in a little bit deeper with some of the questions that you asked. So we have Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hello. Thank you, Aisha. And I'm really glad to welcome Tony Jackson, our newest team member, to speak on the call today. Tony joined our team last week, and it's been wonderful to partner with him on some of this work. I think we'll take about 5 minutes now before we move to the public comment. And as you said, we can engage with the subcommittee in questions after we listen to public comment. This area of the diversity and law enforcement literature review is in preparation for the board's work to address recruitment, hiring, and promotions in law enforcement. And sort of at where we're at in the literature review, we're looking at the effect of more diverse law enforcement organizations for the communities that these organizations serve. And one of the highlights in the review is a focus on cultural shifts happening within organizations when there's representation in large numbers, not through a few individuals. And I'm going to share my screen. Let me see here. Great. So, Sandra and Angela, are you able to see the diversity and law enforcement document that was circulated for the meeting?
Yes. Yes.
Great. So we received recommendations from 2 experts as well as other members of the DOJ team on reports and articles that we would want to review as part of this research. So right now, I just want to point out a couple of the articles, and Tony will also speak to the articles and reports that he's looked at as we kind of open it up in the discussion to hear the board members' perspectives and any materials that you feel are key to informing this area of the work. So a couple of the reports and articles that we're looking at the Brennan Center for Justice report, Hidden in Plain Sight, which talks about the need to address explicit racism in law enforcement, in addition to the ongoing and kind of the longstanding work to address implicit bias. We're also reviewing the National Institute for Justice Women in Policing report from 2019, which captures the discussion from the Research Summit on Women in Policing about improving women's representation and experiences in law enforcement. The attendees at that summit developed a definition for parity and some recommendations that we would like to share with the board. And lastly, the article that I'd like to highlight, well, before that, we're also looking at the San Francisco Department on the Status of Women's report from 2019, Pathways to Promotion. And finally, some research that was done in Los Angeles regarding residents' perceptions of criminal injustice based on the racial makeup of the police presence in their communities. Mm-hmm. And so, Tony, I'd like to turn it over to you to talk about this area of the work.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Jackson. I'm a senior analyst with CRESS. Just joined, and so I want to thank you for having me. The first article I'd like to take a look at, and I actually sent this over to Sandra. I don't know if it was last week or earlier, or if it was Monday. It was Monday. The article is titled "Black or Blue: Racial Profiling and Representative Bureaucracy." First of all, the notion is that operating from the notion that congruence will ultimately, eventually, positively impact violence in minority communities if there is a congruence between the police officer and the citizen. Congruence as it relates to ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, gender. And so the notion is that the greater the mass, eventually you will see improvements. You'll see a reduction in the violent numbers. So if you're looking at black and blue, one of the challenges to black or blue with Wilkins and Williams, one of the major challenges to seeing passive representation translating to active representation. One of the barriers to that is standard organizational socialization. And in that particular article, it says organizational socialization may hinder the link between passive and active representation, and question whether organizational socialization strips racial identity, somehow changing them from black to blue. So I think what that immediately raises is, so what is that threshold? What is that breaking point to where you might see change? And so if we could take a look at, you could take a look at the Nicholson article, "Will More Black Cops Matter? Officer Race and Police Involved Homicides of Black Citizens." So in this article really focuses on that notion of that threshold, and it uses the term of critical mass. And if I could just read a portion of the article here, it says, "The authors empirically test the notion of representative bureaucracy, hypothesizing greater representation will result in reduction of police-involved homicides, but only when critical mass of black officers is achieved." From this study, data collected by the Washington Post's on-duty police-involved homicides in 2015 showed an inflection point of 35%. So at 35%, this apparently is according to this study, this is the point where black officers begin to decrease the number of black citizens killed by police. So I wanted to point that out because in the research that I'm currently looking at, there is the suggestion that congruence will work, but there is a threshold. So in some sense, as a follow-up to Anna certainly hit it right on the head when she said it's not just a few. It's going to take a critical mass in order to see change. So and to follow up with Anna, the lit review work continues, and in part, if you look at when you're looking at the research from the 70s to the 90s, a lot of that research is sort of grounded in the notion of threat and community violence, threatening populations, which ultimately lead to greater violence. Communities that are also regarded as violent also increase homicides. So, and I should go back. Threat ultimately would be defined as those communities those communities, those minority communities, they are put on notice as a threat. So from the 70s to the 90s, there has not been a lot of research that looks into the notion of congruence, representative bureaucracy, if you will, and passive to active representation that could lead to a reduction of violent numbers with the police involved homicides. So our work will continue because we're finding that there is a growing body of literature that does speak to congruence, and as I said before, as it relates to ethnicity, gender, race, sexual orientation. So we will continue to carry that work going forward.
So that's very interesting, and thank you, Tony and Anna, for that. Especially in recruiting, I know that we need to start thinking about recruitment for next year, for the next 12 months, 2021. We're a little late on it for this year, but recruiting ethnic racial minorities into policing in this country has not been easy. I used to be a recruiting supervisor and recruiting lieutenant, and sometimes we have to go out of our areas to find folks that meet that, to meet that, and it's not easy, but we'll have some questions for that. I'd like to now, are we done? Aisha and Anna and Anthony were concluded for your presentations?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. So let's go to the public comments for this section. Are there any public members in Northern, Central, or Southern California that wish to ask questions or speak upon what we just heard recently in this order of business? Any public members? Any public members in Northern California? Okay, any public members in Central California? Okay, and any public members in Southern California?
I see a message in the chat from Michelle Wittig that she would like to speak. Michelle, you can unmute your microphone and we'll take your comment.
Michelle?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah. I'd like to speak to the topic of implicit bias. You know me as a member of the Santa Monica Coalition for Police Reform, but I'm also a retired faculty member from California State University Northridge who has taught courses on stereotyping and prejudice. So I want to call the group's attention to the lack of relationship between scores on the implicit association test, which is very famous and which has been taken by millions of college students and adults, and actual attitudes and behavior. The first thing is that implicit associations are not the same as implicit bias. Just because I am able to associate the word man with competent more quickly than I do the word woman with competent does not mean that my attitude about the competence of women has been adequately measured by that test. A simple association's not the same as a prediction of a stereotype or of behavior. So just want to suggest that while a course on implicit prejudice or implicit bias is definitely called for, and I'm glad we have it, I wouldn't get too enamored with the scores that people produce on the implicit association test. And I certainly would never want to categorize people's propensity for bias by giving them that test. It's a fun test to do, and people laugh and enjoy taking it, but please never, never use it as a diagnostic test. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Do we have any other, I'm checking chat again, any other members of the public that would like to speak? Okay, well, I think we'll now take questions from the board on the two presentations that we just were presented to us. Anybody on the board have any questions for Aisha and Anna Rick and Tony Jackson?
Thank you. This is Melanie Ochoa. Thank you all for those presentations that were very helpful and informative. The one question that I had, or suggestion to add maybe to the report on the discussions of the past trainings that Aisha was discussing, is specifically to include research, direction to post to include research on bias, that exists on bias and evidence of bias and the way in which bias manifests. So I think they included using the RIPA data, which I think is definitely we need to do that. But I think there's other data sources that show to officers that bias is being manifested in various ways in which they interact with the public. And I think it's crucial for them to see that, because I think a lot of them don't believe it. I think, for instance, the study in NorCal where showing the officers' interactions, the body cam, the content analysis of the body cam footage, where officers were shown being ruder to Black motorists than white motorists, and things like that. I think every kind of evidence of empirical evidence showing how these different treatment manifests, I think is crucial to really convince officers that even if they don't believe they're doing something that's harmful, they may be, and they need to be more cognizant in as many ways as they can be. I think that would be explicitly useful to note that we should incorporate in those, or advise them to incorporate in those trainings. On the presentation of the research, I thought that was fantastic, and I look forward to learning more about this. I was wondering if there is any information, kind of going to the Black and blue question, and this research may not exist, but if there is any info that talks about the screening process of how officers are allowed to move forward through the process when they do apply, and if that is a mechanism through which officers who can conform with the organizational biases or the status quo are perhaps the only officers that are allowed to move through, and so that kind of skews who is the new officer regardless of whether or not they're Black or not. And so if there's any information on the selection process and how that impacts diversity, what are the criteria that are being used? Are they using criteria that may unnecessarily exclude categories of people when it doesn't have a significant impact on ability to effectively perform policing functions? Like I've heard of complaints about the use of credit scores in as a criteria for eliminating applicants for police jobs. Is that something that is actually required? How is that related to ability to perform the function? Is there racial differences in how those scores tend to be distributed, so that it has a disparate impact on people who maybe we most want to be adding to this to the pool of possible applicants? What type of criteria are you using even in psych screenings? So kind of things that, are there ways in which the process itself is structured to kind of reinforce the existing norms of the organization or exclude people who we want to be in? And I don't know if there's any good research on that, but I think that would be tremendously helpful, particularly as part of this is to be providing guidance and assistance to Post, who is creating some of these screening mechanisms. I think that's potentially very useful if that information exists. And then one other point or question kind of on the Black-Blue dynamic. We definitely have heard, stories, reports of Black officers being excluded from or harmed by like the dominant officers unions within different agencies. There exists Black officers unions who take positions that are directly opposed on like legislation and things like that to the primary officers unions that like the that would include like white officers or led usually by white officers. What is obviously there's a category of Black officers who want to do things that are different than the dominant culture within their organizations and the dominant culture of policing state, nationwide. What is there any research on kind of what conditions make it best for them to be willing to take that stand, to move forward, to be able to stand forward and push, more progressive uses of force policies, to push different types of approaches to things that we see the traditional unions being very reticent to allow any kind of change to. So if there's any work that touches on kind of the formation and motivations of officers in those unions, Black officer unions, or taking those active stances, that'd be, I think, maybe useful information to think about how we can facilitate those conditions within departments so that those counter perspectives can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. That's pretty good. That's a lot. I would like to make a comment in reference to blue and black. We talk about hiring racial ethnic minorities to work in policing. I'd be interested, Anna and or Tony, if there's any information on Black officers, any surveys done with Black officers who've worked for law enforcement organizations throughout this state. I know we can get it maybe in the country, but I want to talk about California. Looking at how they feel, because we can make an assumption on how they feel. And I mean, I can tell you how I felt as a Black officer working in communities of color and also communities that were predominantly white. I would like to know if there's a way that we can survey those officers that are currently working in reference to blue, black, how they felt, how they've been treated, and what they would want in policing within their organizations in the state of California. I have found in my own experiences at times that there have been terms used towards me by predominantly white community that I need to, go back to Africa, or some very nasty references to my culture and or to my skin color. But I've also seen same from people that look like me, that I'm either an Uncle Tom or a sellout. And I would want to know if that's something that's across the board for other officers that are Black, and see what they are looking for, to see what they need or what they want. And in reference to what Melanie said about Black unions, is there some way that we can find out who those unions are and question or survey what they're looking for in reference to traditional unions? That would be very interesting to me as a board member. And then also recruiting. I said that a little bit earlier. Recruiting for diverse recruitment is very difficult, and that sometimes we have to go outside of the state for that. When I was recruiting supervisor, recruiting manager, we went to the military, we went to other states, because California, although a lot of people believe in our inner cities in San Francisco, LA, and in Oakland, we don't have a high percentage. And with what's been going on in the country, especially lately, it's very difficult to recruit within that ethnic group or those ethnic groups. And so I'm wondering if Tony or Anna have any information for that. And if not today, maybe we can look at that information later.
So,
Andrew.
I'm sorry. So,
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So, to go, this is to Sandra and oh goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Melanie. Okay, I'm sorry, Melanie. Melanie, you asked the question on what conditions. What are the sort of conditions that you are that need to be created in order for there to be a work environment for minority officers that might lead to change? change as it relates to violence. And I have one of the articles, if we could, well, we don't need to pull it back up necessarily, but will more black cops matter? In that article, it does point to, or it does kind of lay out the sort of conditions that would lead to critical mass, that would lead to, in this example, black officers feeling comfortable enough to be independent, to not be influenced by the organizational norms. So there's a couple of things. It says first, there should be discretion when implementing policies. For representation to occur, they must have a sphere of influence to take actions that reflect the specific values they hold. That's really important. That's important in, whatever the industry would be. Secondly, the policies that are implemented, they should be salient. So, when we're looking at, the number of shootings, obviously these are the sort of issues that would be, near and dear to, you would think, near and dear to African American cops. I think in this article they make reference to Michael Brown and Ferguson. So the issue should be salient. And then thirdly, the decision should, impact that group, that the group in question. So, I mean, I don't know, it's, to me, it's stating the obvious, but as of right now, in a perfect world, those are the sort of conditions that you want to look to create. So going to your question, Sandra, it might, I think what some of the research is saying is that there is a need for additional research, because we're just getting to the point where there is that space, that opportunity to where this sort of research is growing right now. So we're all here sort of at the new beginning. I think we all have some idea as to what would create those sort of conditions. So right now, the research, in my mind, sort of it lays out what you would expect at a workplace in order to be successful, which is why I said earlier, well, you would want this at any workplace. Mm-hmm. But in order for this critical mass to take place, there obviously has to be that sort of comfort level. Sandra, you mentioned that you experienced this as a police officer. There has to be that freedom to be able to act, to be able to tap into your own sort of moral compass, accompanied with the rules and regulations of your job, and to go out and carry your job out in a fair and impartial way.
Yes.
So that's what this particular article speaks to. But I'm also going to say it's just, from what I'm looking at, it's just beginning to tap the surface.
I'm just curious, and you're right. All this implicit bias stuff is, I think, less than 10 years old. I'm starting to get into it. But when I've talked and worked throughout the country with black officers, I hear the same thing. I even hear it from white officers that the black officers get it both ways. They get it from the white community and they get it from the black community. And our job is not to have our peace disturbed by either group. No matter what people say to you, your bar has to stay at a certain level and you can't drop it. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt inside the particular person. So it would be really nice to be able to survey and see how folks are feeling out there, especially in agencies within our own state. And I talk to thousands of cops. A year all over this country, and I'm hearing it, but it would be nice. I might even start thinking about keeping notes to see how the folks that are in my classrooms are feeling. I actually have a Zoom with a young woman from University of Texas at Arlington that was in class last week that's very interested in this topic, and I'm going to talk with her at 5. And she's a black female police officer who was in the class. I'm thinking about getting some information from her. So Anthony, thank you. That's pretty awesome. I appreciate that, and honored too. Any other comments? Angela, you start to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I just, this has been really informative, and it just seems like this research and the work that, we'll be doing on this, I think it's obvious how critical it is, and I'm wondering, it seems to me that, we're talking about the conditions that are really would be helpful for officers to feel, that they are making an impact in the manner that why they want to be officers, and they can be successful and help change a department. On the blue and black, article, we're talking about these changes that we can maybe do more research on, or what a department should be integrating, or some tools we could give departments to think about integrating changes, is going to be also, I would imagine, very important for recruitment. Because I would, just as Sandra, you're talking about like a survey of officers, black officers, and kind of their experiences on the forces. What are we hearing? Has there been much research from, potential recruits, individuals are thinking of possibly going to law enforcement, but then feeling like, no, I just, I'm not comfortable. I don't think the circumstances are going to be, or the environment is going to be one that I'm going to be comfortable with, and that I'm willing to be part of. And I think that's going to be really key, as we're trying to assist departments, become more diverse. But, I don't know if Tony or Anna, has there been much research as what, some of it's obvious, but have there been much research on the recruiting side, and why folks ultimately decide not to apply or not to join a department?
Can I say something to that really quickly? So there are several points that are important in recruiting. Not every community has persons of color in this state or within the country. Also, income levels are different. And so you can have two agencies next door to each other in different counties. And depending on the budget for one agency could be a lot less, and you're not getting the top recruits coming to apply for that position within that particular agency. And then you can have an agency right next door in a different county that has a huge budget. They get most of their monies from point of sales, taxes, and so their income levels for police officers are going to be a little bit higher. And you might have some agency paying officers $20 an hour in Northern California, and this is just a hypothetical. And then in the Bay Area, you can have the same position, same work, same everything. Officers are making $60 an hour. And so that comes into play in recruiting. So that's an issue in recruiting. Some officers may not want to go work in this particular neighborhood or particular community. And the other issue is many times officers in smaller agencies that have grown up in that community tend to work or apply for jobs. And you might not have racial ethnic minorities. You might go up to Chico and not see black officers applying. Sometimes officers that are minorities might apply because they went to school in certain areas and they decided to stay in that area. But recruiting for policing and diversity is not an easy situation. Yeah. It depends on where the city is. It depends on if that agency is a fit for that officer. Not every agency is a fit for every officer. And when we're looking at recruiting, we see officers which we call the shotgun effect. They just put applications in everywhere. It's got 50 applications in. It's not necessarily each of those are a fit. Each person has to find a fit for the agency they want to work for, not just because, it's the money, or they have to look at the busyness of the agency, how much they're making. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
Not easy.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. It would be interesting to know a little bit more than beyond the pay issue, the fit that you're talking about. Like, what is it? And again, some of it can seem obvious, but there may be that it might be more nuanced, and maybe worth kind of doing, some research on that, of what is it about certain departments apart from the pay or the benefits, which I agree that's a huge issue.
Yes.
That a department can work on to make themselves more attractive to a diverse applicant pool.
And the other issue is if we're talking about recruiting in lower socioeconomic communities, the way we recruited 10 years ago has to change. We would pop up a table in front of a store, have some swag on the table, and then just snatch people who are walking by. And I think the model that we really should be looking at in recruiting is somewhat similar to what colleges do when recruiting sports, that we identify people in the community through school, through programs, through churches, and then we reach out and then we have personal one-on-one conversations with people to get them ready to think about putting in for policing, also hitting the younger high school kids, which we see in the cadet programs, to get their foot in the door. We really need to start focusing on that, because just setting up a table and waiting for somebody to walk by, there very well may be somebody who's very interested in putting it in but doesn't want to be seen putting in, especially when they're young. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that we should be talking about for recruiting. And I love the model that the sports colleges have. They go in and meet the family, they meet the parents. I think that's a good way, because if you don't get support from the family, you might not put in. I mean, I might not have done 30 years in law enforcement if my mother had said no when I called her and I was 22 and I said, would it be okay with you, since she grew up in the South, for me to put in to apply for a police job? And she said yes. If she had said no, I probably wouldn't have at 22. I probably would have went back to marketing. So this is a whole family situation I think we should be thinking about in recruiting to get folks ready to come into this career. So it's a very interesting topic.
Sandra, your comparison is really interesting. That comparison is near and dear to me. I'm a former athlete, and the recruiting process is, just as Sandra said, it's extremely intimate. They come into the home, they show up at the school. The idea is so that you will feel courted, that you will feel important, that you will feel really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to your comparison using the college athlete, I was thinking that is, and this goes back to Angela, the question that you're asking is the elephant in the room, and you're dealing with the issue of perception. So when you're being recruited as a college athlete, I'd say 8 to 9 times out of 10, you're going to know that school. You're going to have some idea. That school has a certain panache. They are looking for you because you meet their need. You're looking at them because they meet your need. It's supposedly a kind of an equally bargained for type of deal. There is no way right now, and I would say I'll speak for most black communities, there is no sense of a bargain for type of exchange. There just isn't. That luster is lacking, and I mean we have spoken to that. So Angela, there's a luster issue. If I'm a basketball player and UCLA gives me a call, I'm excited. I don't know if I'm going to go there, but I'm super excited. Now, if the LAPD gives me a call as a young person, do they have that sort of luster? Well, that's the question. And how do you get to that point of sort of achieving that luster and that bargain for exchange? There has to be something more. And another thing is that there's a level of confidence for the recruit that hears from UCLA. That confidence is, oh, I know who that is. I know who they are. There's a lack of trust between these communities that aren't as prominent in the police industry. And that's due to a lack of confidence. We don't really know you, and what we know about you historically, we don't trust.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what needs to be overcome. I mean, the articles do speak to that. There's an article in here that even I think smartly goes back to post-slavery and Reconstruction and loitering laws, and they tie it up to policing today, and you can understand why there is that distrust. And so that's why I say I think the research is just beginning to sort of, touch this area of congruency, which I think helps with recruiting. But I mean, there's no way that you can fail to address that issue. It has to be addressed.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
You're so right.
Agree.
Yes, you're so right in what you're saying, Anthony. This is LaWanda. And I wanted to also point out there's an organization I know down here in Los Angeles, and I believe it's nationwide. It's called NOBLE. And it's the National Organizations of Black Law Enforcement Agencies. And they do meet. It's a monthly meeting that they have. And they're talking about black and blue, especially right now what's going on down here in Los Angeles. And they're trying to see what can be done. What can they actually do? The majority of them are from LAPD and LA County Sheriffs. The president of NOBLE is a captain right now, female, and she's trying to make changes. But her voice, like you said, you have other unions. You got the Los Angeles Police Protective League. You got ALAD from the sheriffs. And I don't know how they look at NOBLE because of the situation, it being the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement. Are their voices really being heard? But that is one organization we could go to and ask them about black and blue. They have been in existence for years. But when we talk about black and blue, from the victim side of the situation when it comes to black and blue, because of our situation we've had with law enforcement in the past, it becomes a problem when we come to report crimes and get assistance as victims, minority victims. They're thinking as though it's acceptable the different crimes that we're dealing with in our community. They think it's a cultural thing, and they're just throwing their hands up on this. So when we talk about black and blue, we got to remember there's victims sometimes involved with this, and that their voices and they're being mistreated too because of the situation on how things are set up. Because of the bias on how you look at black victims, thinking it's okay because of a zip code that you are supposed to be treated like this. For example, a mom calls in and says my child gets to a scene where a child is murdered. You're devastated because that's your baby laying there crying. Because of the officers are not been trained to deal with families like us, and the majority of the time on the homicides, majority of the officers do not look like us at all on the scene. So when they get out there and we're crying, they seem to want to dismiss us. And it can get to a point where you are now being treated like a criminal, even though your loved one is laying on the ground, just got murdered. But because of the perception of the officer and because of your zip code and where this is happening, it creates a problem with law enforcement not knowing and not looking at you like you would look at someone else in another community. You're not being given that same respect, we call it, and the same dignity of with your child laying there on the ground. In our communities, when these crimes happen, majority of the time, a lot of us have had guns put to our heads when we get to the scene to see our loved ones have been murdered by law enforcement. We have been handcuffed, put in the back seat, disrespect. Our men have been treated disrespectfully, and there was no repercussion. Everybody acted as though that was part of the norm because of the way things are set up. There was no one out there looking like us. But when we get to NOBLE and we explain this to them, that we're having this type of an issue, they're able to step in and go to law enforcement and say there is a problem on how you treat people of color, people like me, when when a crime occurs. So I would like us to look at Noble, if we could, to see what is actually going on. And we do need to look at this bias. The black and blue is a serious issue on the streets right now, especially on the streets of Los Angeles. I can say it's a major issue. Too many police shootings.
LaWanda, I love your passion. I just sent you a private note. I love it. It has hit me in my chest so hard because it's right. And I'm telling you, hopefully with the training that we see in principled policing, fair and impartial policing, part of what you're talking about is through procedural justice, when we talk about the history of relationships between police and ethnic minority communities. We talk about the tenets of procedural justice with respect, neutrality, voice, letting people talk about how they feel about these contacts, and trustworthiness. Those are all important. And that's all the training that we're trying to infuse throughout the country, because it is, some of this that you're talking about is based on the history of our country. And it does impact individuals differently. And it could be the immigrants' relationship with police coming from other countries and coming into here, the racial ethnic minorities and black communities. The term ghetto, my son said one day, he says, Mom, people use the term ghetto that don't live in these communities. The people that live in those communities don't use that term. So, there's a lot, and I appreciate you getting what you said. I really do. I thought it was very, very important. Very important. Thank you. Aisha?
This is Aisha. Yeah, I just want to say also, this has just been such a powerful discussion. And as I step back from this, I see the dots being connected. Training, research, respect, and there's a common theme of community and the perception and the treatment of people as they go about their daily lives. And LaWanda, I'm glad you mentioned Noble. I'm familiar with Noble, so I'm just so, it was years back that I worked with Noble, but it is an awesome international organization, and the members are just, they're dedicated to their field, but they also want to make things better, and they know that things are broken, but they work really hard, and they are very open, and they're a powerful organization for us to all tap. And then on the note of training, that's such a core issue. An officer is going to be connected to training throughout their entire career, from the recruit to the field office to when they want to promote. They are going to be touched and should be touched by training their entire course. So when you can follow training classes, or you can follow the people, because that's a key to changing what we see happening, because it's just such a cornerstone. And if you get that right, then you get a lot of other things right.
Wonderful. These training classes that we're talking about, I also like to just call them conversations. These are conversations that need to be had at briefings. These are conversations that need to be had at department meetings, in the cars with partners, supervisors, when they have their first year, beginning of the year, new teams, that these conversations should be started so that it's always on their minds on how we treat people and how we want to be treated. We should be treating people the same way. This is something that will go on. I think Angela and Melanie and Brendan, these are conversations that we really should have for next year's report. It should be, this whole recruiting thing should be a huge part of our next year conversations for the Ripper board. Wonderful. Anybody else have a comment? Brendan?
Yeah. I do, just briefly. I've been trying to collect everything here and think about the conversation we're having. It's been a good one so far, and I'll be the first to admit I'm a fish out of water, being a public defender in this space, not a space I'm normally in. And also, I am new to the board. Some questions I had, and just stuff that's probably already been discussed, is, and it has been from what I've read, the training. And I'm curious how many what's the percentages of post trainings that are required annually or yearly that are in person as opposed to video? And are there trainings that are required to be done every year? I ask that because I think we have to put a priority, if we can, on racial bias training and cultural diversity discrimination training. And when I see we're talking about it being once every 5 years and on video, I do wonder why, and why isn't it more robust? And I do think we have to take it to, if we can, if we have that power, to bring it to a level where we're past implicit bias, past racial profiling training to more of an anti-racist training. If we want to get ahead of the curve, we have to start attacking it directly. So if we talk about the history of policing, what we're doing here, the history of policing is about dehumanizing Black and brown people, about dehumanizing Black lives. So if we want to really attack it, we need to attack it and address it. Those are just my thoughts pretty quickly. And then I'm really intrigued about the articles that are presented. I got them today. I didn't have a chance to review them, particularly the Hidden in Plain Sight, Racism, White Supremacy, and the Far Right in Police Enforcement. I want to get a hand on that and read that article. I do wonder, and I question a little bit, we talk about diversity in policing, which is absolutely necessary. We need more Black people in the police force, but that is not the cure-all, as we know. I mean, there's got to be more than that. It needs to be the right type of people being recruited with the right type of attitude with regards to how to treat Black people in the system, how to treat Black victims, how to treat Black families, how to treat Black people accused of crimes. If we don't get the people with the right attitudes, we're not doing anything. So that's my quick thoughts on what we're doing here today. And I'm just trying to figure out how we can be the most helpful to fix what is happening here.
Aisha, can you answer that question for Brendan as far as the training and how often we have it?
No, I don't know. Post would have to answer that question, but I can tell you that with respect to the statute, even though it says after the academy training for the in-service officers, even though it's 2 hours once every 2 years, the statute does say it can be more frequent if needed. So there is that opportunity for the board to discuss with posts that particular, so that is available to the board through that legislation. But is there someone on the call from Post who might be able to answer Board Member Wood's question?
Hi, Aisha. I'm here. It's Megan. I'd be happy to. So first, the 5-year mandate is because it's a mandate. Agencies do have the ability to make that more frequent if they choose to. Agencies also have the option to have an in-person training versus online. We just like to give them as many options as possible, what works for them. Some of the training is, I don't want to say quick, but it's shorter than others so that they can get that training when they need to. And some of it is more in depth, requires further conversation, which would be more in person, so that, they can have more information and have those conversations that do need to happen. But that 5 years that's just what the law was written. But I can tell you that most agencies do this type of training, if not annually, at least every 2 to 3 years.
And just to follow up, do you know if there are trainings that are required annually?
Just overall?
Yes.
I believe so. We have a whole list of mandated training on our website. I'm happy to send you that link if you'd like.
Curious, sure.
Okay. Thank you, Megan. I'm sorry, I had to leave really quickly, so I appreciate you taking that up. Any other board member that wants to ask a question or make a comment on our presentation? Nope. Okay.
One more thing, Sandra. There is because I'm hooked up with so many different organizations. There's another organization here in LA. I've just started watching them on Zoom, and it's called Police Against Racism. And it is law enforcement. These are all law enforcement agencies, and they're all over California. I just thought they were here in Southern California. And so I've been watching them, and maybe others might want to come in. They have weekly meetings, and they talk about racism.
Awesome. That's great information, LaWanda. I mean, some of these, I know of Noble. I've presented to Noble when I was working full time, and so good information. So thank you, everybody. Nobody else. We've had public comments. Okay, so we're going back to the agenda. I can find it. This is so exciting. I'm taking notes over everything. Let's talk about discussion of proposed subcommittee report contents and the next steps with post. I was thinking, does anybody have anything they want to say while I'm looking for my notes on our next step with post? Oh. Anybody? Nope. Y'all making this not very easy for me. All right, so I want to kind of go back to the post conversation and something that it's sort of redundant, but I want to go back to something that Aisha said earlier on some of the training that we've had. She mentioned the principal policing and community. So I haven't seen the entire program myself, and I know that some of our members saw portions of that. So I would think that in the near future or for the next report that we really should sit down or attend a principal policing and community training. I know that I have the training that I go to, but I've only read certain things about principal policing. So we haven't done that yet. And then also the board members, we have not reviewed the domain number 42, cultural diversity and discrimination, which is a 16-hour in-person training at the academy. I haven't seen that. Has any other board member, not you, Brendan, because you just came on, but Angela, have you or Melanie or LaWanda seen that one, that training?
No, but I did go through training with Post. They took me through a training on the internet. And I think, yes, and I can't remember exactly. Aisha, can you remember what training I went with Post?
I think that was...
I think that was the self-paced refresher course that you worked collaboratively with Catherine Davis-Bacon.
Yeah.
And so you were very involved with that. So that was really helpful.
So I think that the board members, we need to look at the principal policing community. We need to look at domain 42. We haven't looked at cultural diversity discrimination. And then the other one that I'm very interested in is profiling and implicit bias for supervisors. That's very important. We have not reviewed that one, and it's due. Looking at the list, it's due out in next year, 2021, probably in the fall. And it's very important that if this is important to the supervisors, this training, then it'll be important to their line officers, the officers who are actually already working as solo police officers. And we need to review that, because this type of training needs to go top down or bottom up. Everybody in the organization should have it. And I would really love to see it that the command staff gets it, then the middle managers get it, then the supervisors get it, then the officers. But I will tell you, in my experience in implicit bias training, usually it is given out to the officers first, and the officers always question, are our supervisors getting this training? Are our leaders getting this training? So the supervisor training, I would personally like to review when we're ready, and Post can hear that when we're ready for that. I would really love to get involved with that. I'd like to see all that on the next for the next report, and get some information about that. Talk about recruiting. Anybody else on the board have anything else that we want to discuss for the committee report contents and the next steps with Post? We went a little long on recruiting, but that was a good conversation. Anybody else?
This is Angela. I'll just, as I think we've talked last time we met, and I know Post is committed to this, that with respect to some of the trainings that are in the works, that we get involved on the earlier side So we're able to give feedback like during the production phases. So I think you just have to really be mindful of that and try to, make sure we know what the scheduling is all, for the board to give input, because I think it is really helpful for us to be able to do that.
I will also say that in-class training was very important to us a year ago, but in reference to what's going on in the world, especially here, we really have to, we have to be really on par with our computer training, because I believe we're going to be in this situation for a while. Zoom and BlueJeans are awesome, awesome opportunities to have meetings, but also for training. And with Post and our relationship with them over this past year, the online courses so far have been structured and designed very well. We did have some hiccups, and Angela, you just spoke to it, because of the timeline. So that's important that we get involved in the beginning. I was not able last year to get involved, and I was involved in that one self-paced training, but I missed some of the training down in San Diego due to my work schedule last year. This year we're a little bit slower, but the RIPA board and Post, we continue to work together, which is pretty good. We have a good working relationship, because the most important thing that we want is to ensure that California law enforcement officers are receiving training that covers, number one, legal implications and consequences for biased behavior, accountability and integrity, in reference to bias in policing, and also, which is new and came on board later, is reporting obligations when faced with biased behavior by peers or other members of the profession. That is huge this year, and we need to continue with that. We need to make it okay in our training for police officers to say, hey, there's something wrong with that behavior, and we need to change how we respond to that, because law enforcement's been around for hundreds of years. We've never really thought about that, but we can see not only do we have biases about communities have biases about us, but we should learn to recognize bias when we see it in our peers and in our officers that we're working with, so that we can point that out. The training is integral in helping with that. Okay. Go ahead.
I do have one other thing, kind of in terms of thinking about next steps for the next year's report, kind of echoing Brendan's statement that we should be pushing towards anti-racist training, not just anti-bias, and thinking about what that would look like. How is that substantively different, and what kind of advice could we give in terms of how to post, in terms of how to structure that as like the goal of these trainings, follow-on trainings. I think generally speaking, from what I've seen of the trainings, at least, and including the initial self-directed training, but I think that substantial progress has been made on that one, I believe. It was still teaching essentially to the floor, like, this is what won't get you to violate the Constitution, versus this is what we aspire to do as, officers of the law when we interact with people. And I think that should be the target that we're training officers to. And I think incorporating anti-racist training might be the best way to get to that end. So I'd love to engage that more in terms of our next steps.
Thank you, Melanie. I do have one question for Post, and Megan, maybe you can answer this. When we talk about the the principal policing, did I read somewhere that this training is voluntary for voluntary for officers who are actually already working in the field? Is this still voluntary, or is this mandated, principal policing?
I believe it's still voluntary for in-service.
And so then for the board, I would like to look at why is that still voluntary, because the topic is so important, especially what's been happening over this past year. Am I missing the point, or is there some reason why, and I don't know, why this training is not as part of the mandatory list?
Sandra, I think I can partially answer that for you.
Okay.
Just the biggest reason that some courses, no matter how important they are not mandated is simply because of cost.
Oh,
with 90,000 police officers in the state of California, very expensive to require them to do training. That's one of the biggest obstacles that post has.
Okay. Well, no, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, I knew that in the back of my mind. Costs are very important. Some of this training can be very cost prohibitive for agencies, but yeah. Thank you, Megan, for that. Anything else that we can talk about? We're at a 3:33. We have about 30 minutes left. I don't know that I have anything more to say. Aisha, did I miss anything?
Nope, I think you've covered it all. You summarized nicely the next steps, which are the courses that you've not reviewed, and then additional comments by in areas that both Brendan and Melanie want to add, and then everyone is interested in the research that now Anna and Tony will have to try to narrow the topics and come back to you to drill down. But it's clear you're all interested in learning a lot more about officer training, and with an emphasis on Black and Blue, and just the story of officers and the challenges that they face as in their careers.
Okay, so can I throw one more thing on the table then? Something that that we discussed on a subcommittee meeting on Monday. We had like a 15-minute meeting. So the question comes up in policing again and again and again: how do we know this is working? Or how do we know that? I would think, how do we know that this implicit bias training, procedural justice, is sticking? And so there are some companies across the nation that have chosen agencies that they're tracking. Because implicit bias training is still fairly new, some of this tracking should have started 5 years ago, but we're just now starting to think about it. And it could take 5 years to get the information. In California, we have captive audiences in the fact that we have academies. And in the academies, some of this training is mandated because they are in the academy. So like we just talked about principal policing, that's part of the academy schedule, the cultural diversity, and then profiling implicit bias training that's going on in the academies. Is there some way that we can think about how to capture, after a 6-month academy, capture what stuck with the cadets right before they graduate? Because usually the training is early on in the academy, and then I want to know if academies are infusing implicit bias training through their car stops, their felony car stops, through their detentions, through their consensual contacts. Are they training bias training within the academy so that it is infused in everything that we do? Once a person leaves, they graduate the academy, they go to their prospective agencies. I was thinking, is there any way that we could track through the different phases? Vast majority of agencies in this state have 3 phases. Maybe some other agencies have 4. First phase, before the officer goes out as a solo officer, they're riding with somebody, they're learning things. Is there some way that we can track, once that person gets off of first phase, did the training in the academy aid them through their first phase? And then in their second phase, and in their third phase, that we can get evaluations, not necessarily evaluations, but maybe a questionnaire that's given to the officer that's confidential, that is then turned in and then turned back to post, so that we can track the academy training and how it infuses through their training, the FTO, the field training officers program, because it's still training, and to see if they're learning how to use implicit bias training and procedural justice that becomes part of who they are early on, because we've never had that before in policing. And I'm just wondering, food for thought, is that something that we could do starting next year from folks that are graduating from the academy and going through their phases through FTO, and then we would somehow have that information to track later on. I'm just putting it on board. I'm not asking for an answer, just something to think about. Okay. Any other suggestions or anything else that anybody has to say about our subcommittee meeting before I adjourn? Anything? No?
I think If any of the board members have any additional comment to add, there's time for that. And then we may want to take any additional comments from members of the public.
You're right. I forgot about that. Who is that just spoke?
It's Anna.
Oh, hi, Anna. There you are. Okay, sorry, I didn't see. I thought your microphone was still off. All right, so any closing by members of the board before we go to public? Anybody?
I'm sorry, this is Brendan. One comment I just has been bothering me. And I appreciate the difficulty of training thousands and thousands of officers, but when it comes to cost, monetary, if it comes to keeping Black people safe and keeping them being killed in the street, I think it's worth it. I just want to put that out there. That response, unfortunately, was insufficient to me. We need to do this. The state needs to do this. We need to put an investment in training police officers. If we're going to talk about racial justice, about getting it right, we have to spend the money. If we're not doing it, then what are we doing here? So sorry, you guys invited me to the board, so
stop apologizing, because it is an issue, but it has been an issue for a long time, and so. You're right. Either the state has to think that it's important and then they provide a budget for the training. Agencies get money out of their general funds for training, and that maybe we need to start pushing to say this topic is, I mean, look what we've gone through this year outside of COVID. I mean, that COVID has, this is hashtag 2020. I'm sorry. But, what are we looking at in this country that's been going on? And it's still happening. I mean, it's been going on for years, but this year, for sure, we've been hit very hard. The RIPA board can make the suggestions that we start looking, well, not we, but that the state starts to look at funding training that's as important as this is, because you're right, Brendan. We look at cost prohibitive. It's been like that for years. But yet we do EVOC training, so emergency vehicle operation training every year, and it's necessary. And then we do first aid training, and it's necessary. I don't think we do EVOC every year, but I mean, we do it. And then first aid training is necessary, and all this other training that we do. And people are dying. And so, yeah, we need to focus on that. And I think those conversations will come out next year. For training here in the state of California. So don't feel bad. Don't apologize. It's important. And yeah, we want you on the board because you're going to push. So that's pretty good. So I want to take this opportunity. If there are no other board member comments, let's go back to the public. Oh, there you go, Melanie.
This is just speaking more about the kind of Black and blue argument and recruiting. And I just want to make sure that when we're whatever kind of product comes from that, we're not discounting the realities of policing from that, right? So, as I think one of the things Tony mentioned in terms of officers being willing to take a stand or feel that they're safe enough to take a stand in their agency is that an issue is salient. Well, I mean, if an individual, a Black person in the U.S., it thinks that the treatment of Black people by the police is a salient issue to them, they may not want to actually be involved with the agency that is responsible for arresting, performing violence against, etc. So it's a rational response to not want to be involved with that entity. Even if they could make changes around the margins, the function of the agency may be something that's directly opposed to their underlying, those that are concerned with that, it's going to be directly opposed to their underlying, desires potentially. So I think there's a bit of a chicken and an egg here in terms of changing the structure and expecting people that are going to be hired into that structure to change it. Because if you just recruit more Black people who are fine with the way that want to be involved in that system, it may be because they're fine with the way that system operates. The only people that kill, Black people are not just white cops. So they're not the only ones that brutalize them or disrespect them and use their power in proper ways against them. So I think I know it's probably very difficult to do with whatever data actually exists, but I would particularly love to tease out the distinction between just, recruiting cops who are Black and recruiting people who are actually interested in justice for Black people. And I just don't want to presume the latter based on the former.
Melanie, that was spot on, because when I'm making presentations for training, or when I have agencies ask me questions like, well, we want to hire more Black officers, because those white officers coming from those communities where there are not Black people are going to bring all their biases with them. And so they may not be a good fit for our organization. But you have to understand, even if you grew up in a particular community, you could have biases about people that look like you in that community. And then with reference to what's been happening in these particular communities with deaths and use of force and all that, you're right. Those folks might not want to work for that particular organization because of all the history that they've had and seen loss of life, or friends who were arrested, or even their own family members. And so the way we recruit has to change. It doesn't mean that that particular person in that community might not want to work for this agency. They might be a good fit for another agency, but people think just because a person is of their ethnicity matches a particular community that they're going to be okay, and that's not necessarily so. We should be recruiting for persons, for an agency who have know what their biases are, know how to manage them, and are well-rounded life experiences. That's what we really should be looking for. And within that, if we can grab some persons of color to work in law enforcement in this state, if not throughout the country, I think we'll be better off. But yeah, I agree with what you said. It's spot on.
Yeah, this is Angela. I think it is really important that if we tackle this really enormous issue, that to present it in a way it's multi-layered. Mm-hmm. and to, it's self-evident in a lot of ways to many of us, but I think it's worth actually explicitly talking about, and kind of the different challenges that we have, that Melanie brought up, people that don't want to be part of the system at all, and why, and the really good reasons why that is, and kind of the much larger fixes that are going to be really required to be able to turn that around. And then sort of, Sandra, to your point, people who are already interested in law enforcement, but are, who in that group do we really want to recruit, and what's going to be important to them? So I like that idea, of being very clear about that this is multifaceted. Mm-hmm. And it's just not a simple, I don't think anybody thinks it's simple, but I don't want us to be misinterpreted as, coming across that we think there is a simple fix to any of this.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. It's huge. And we're fighting years and years and years of the certain way that we police in this country. And if you look at procedural justice in the history, that was recent. If we start thinking 50, 60 years ago, I'm already that old, and I can't believe how fast it went by, but we're still dealing with I hate to use the term good old boy system, but there's some stuff that has been passed down on and on and on through agencies by officers who've been on for 38 years, who are still on, that might still have biases that they gained 38 years ago. And they're passing that on. So this is deep. It's got multi-layers. This is a club sandwich worth of information that we have to deal with. Sorry, I'm starving right now. So thank you, board members, for all your comments. Do we have any public members that want to address or make comments about what we have just gone through, especially over the last hour? Any public members? I'm looking at my chats to make sure. Michelle.
Michelle?
Yeah, Michelle. Yeah, Michelle, if you want to speak, go ahead.